All right, I am returning papers. As always, if I write anything on your paper and you don't know why, whether it's as tiny as I turned a comma into a semicolon or a semicolon into a comma, and you don't know why, then you ask. But do you know why? Okay. Because I've been writing on several pages. I honestly don't keep track. It's not like I look at all of you like, you're the one who does the whatever over and over. Because it all sort of blends together and I forget who is, who is guilty.
I'm glad I put an antonym in here because I got home and I was like, oh no, I forgot to put one in. So I'm glad there was just one in there.
You mean an antithesis?
Yes.
Oh, okay, yes. See, you're so brilliant that you just use them without even trying.
I use parallelism without even
See, well, here's the thing. This is why I ask you to do this. It's not, in the IEW, if any of you did that when you were younger and you were made to put dress-ups in, okay, you know what I mean, and the Who Witch and everything. The idea is not, that you have to keep a chart of how many you have in each paragraph. The idea is when you use the tools, you get so used to them, you start using them without thinking about it, and your writing just starts getting better and better. And so if I make you do it, then you practice, and it gets into your brain, and then you use it. So, oh shoot, I didn't bring it. So I noticed, I went in Thucydides last week. I'll never find it. If Ruth went and got her copy of Thucydides, I'd still. Do you have it? Oh, I don't even. Oh, I do remember where it is. Oh, is it somewhere in the house?
I have it upstairs.
Oh, will you go get it? I'm sorry. Because there was this great antithesis, this whole paragraph of antithesis, and I had marked it, but it was one of those. Oh, we're short of time. I will skip that flag. Shoot, that was my antithesis flag. Anyway, let me read you this awesome one. You are working on. Don't tell me. Oh, you're encomium or invective on Athens or Sparta. So you have 4 choices. Athens or Sparta, encomium, invective. So I wonder if I will get at least one of each of those 4. I don't know. Does anybody have any question? The ones I gave you back, I really, great job. Like people, it was really interesting because you chose, like there was such a wide variety of choices. Of people, of human beings, of real people versus fictional characters, of like people from the past and people from not the future, the present. Okay. Okay. Give me a moment, okay? Because I know it's on the upper left-hand page. Oh, I found it. Okay. Listen to this paragraph. Listen, it's a series of antitheses, and it's really good. This is talking about their failure in Sicily, okay, and death and destruction and starving in that quarry. For this was by far the greatest reverse that ever befell a Hellenic army. They had come to enslave others and were departing in fear of being enslaved themselves. They had sailed out with prayer and paeans, and now started to go back with omens directly contrary, traveling by land instead of by sea, trusting not in their fleet, but in their hoplites. Nevertheless, the greatness of the danger still impending made all this appear tolerable. So we came to enslave, now we're afraid of being enslaved. We sailed out with prayer and celebration, we're going back with bad omens. We traveled by sea, now we're going home by land. We're trusting not in our fleet anymore, but on our foot soldiers, because we have lost our fleet. That's great. All right. I'll put this somewhere where I will not steal it. I think that it's mine. So I would like you to finish that, please, both kinds of parallelism and antithesis and alliteration. I'm not asking you to put anything new in. I think we should add at least one new thing before the end of the year, but not this time. And we do not meet next week. So everything I give you, you have 2 more weeks to do. This is an inadvertent mercy on my part. I did not mean to plan it that way, that you were going to have an extra. It just, the writing came out that way. But because you do have extra time, I feel like you could also write a short answer, one of our short answer things. But you're going to like this because there's a lot of freedom here. Yes.
Better than like writing about the insomnia or infected.
Better than some of the short answers that I've made you do, because this is very free. I asked you to read 3 more Plutarch's lives, and we had read some earlier. We're also going to read the life of Alexander the Great towards the end of the year. And I ask you, what great life inspires you and why? And I would like it not to be Jesus. The Sunday school answer that is always the correct answer. 95% of the time, if you're in Sunday school and they ask a question, the answer is Jesus. Not that we don't think Jesus inspires us, but I just, like, that's an easy go-to, and it's just how no one can argue with that. I want to know someone, but it could be a fictional life. One could argue that the life of Frodo Baggins is inspiring, even though he's not a real being. I want him to be. It does not need to be Mrs. Ferguson. Not looking for that. So I would like you to just, again, 250 to 300 words, just to practice this. This is just to practice collecting your thoughts and presenting them concisely. Just summarize somebody's life and why, if you were writing lives, all right, like Plutarch is, whose life might you examine and celebrate? Because it has something worthy there, all right? And finish your encomium or invective. We are looking today at a piece of artwork. Oh, actually, before I do the artwork, I wanted one more thing about Thucydides. This came across on my Facebook feed this week because of the crazy things that I click on. I'm sure you can imagine the kind of weird stuff that comes up in Mrs. Ferguson's Facebook feed. But a letter that John Adams wrote to his son, John Quincy Adams. I don't know if you know this, presumably you know these guys are both brilliant. John Quincy Adams apparently knew multiple language. Thomas Jefferson could write in 2 different languages at the same time with 2 hands. I know. Thomas Jefferson was a serious, brilliant guy. However, the Adams family, no, not the Adams family. I didn't even mean that. The family of John Adams and his son John Quincy. I don't know, maybe the Adams family are brilliant too. I don't know. John Adams was traveling a lot. He was in England for a long time because he was in France. I'm sorry. He was in France because he was the ambassador trying to drum up money for the war. And so he was gone away from home. And so he wrote letters to his eldest son, John Quincy, and giving him advice on you should read this and you should do that. Listen to his letter. This is very soon after the Declaration. My dear son, as the war in which your country is engaged will probably hereafter attract your attention more than it does at this time, and as the future circumstances of your country may require other wars, as well as councils and negotiations similar to those in which are now in agitation, I wish to turn your thoughts early to such studies as will afford you the most solid instruction and improvement for the part which may be allotted you to act on the stage of life. And of course, his son was going to be president someday. We didn't know this. The first father-son. There is no history, perhaps, better adapted to this useful purpose than that of Thucydides, an author of whom I hope you will make yourself perfect master in original language, which is the Greek, the most perfect of all human languages, In order to understand him fully in his own tongue, you must, however, take advantage of every help you can procure, and particularly of translations of him into your own mother tongue. You will find in your father's library the works of Mr. Hobbes, in which, among a great deal of mischievous philosophy, you will find a learned and exact translation of Thucydides, which will be useful to you. But there is another translation of him, even more elegant, entitled The History of the Peloponnesian War, translated from the Greek of Thucydides in 2 volumes quarto by William Smith, A.M., rector of the parish of the Holy Trinity in Chester, and chaplain to the Right Honorable Earl of Derby. Yes, very specific. If you preserve this letter, it may hereafter remind you to procure the book. You will find it full of instruction to the orator, the statesman, the general, as well as to the historian and the philosopher. You may find something of the Peloponnesian War in Rollin. I am with much affection your father, John Adams. I just think that's kind of cool. That one of our founding fathers told his son, you know, son, we're at war now, we may be at war again later. I think you should read Thucydides' Peloponnesian War, because it'll be good for you. And I don't know how old John Quincy was at this point, but obviously his father is aspiring that before too long he'll be reading Thucydides in Greek. But that right now he needs some helps, translation helps. And I'm thinking he was 12 or 13. I know. Kind of shames me. Anyway. All right. Art of the week. It is gorgeous. It is. She is headless and armless. But this is the winged victory of Samothrace. Samothrace is an island up off the coast of Thrace. So I'm doing this. I don't know what this means. This is suddenly, here's Greece, and then you go up the coast, and then the Hellespont, and you come down, Asia Minor. It's up here, okay? It's off the coast, obviously an island. And I'm going to pass this around. It's amazing, the drapery of the clothing. So I was looking this up for today in my art book, and it said, she once had arms and a head. And I don't know if they know this information because, not about the arms and the head, about what I'm about to tell you. I don't know if they know this because there have been descriptions, but it says she's alighting on the prow of a ship. She's Victory. And reaching out to put a laurel wreath of victory on the, on the figurehead of the ship. I don't know how they know this because she's got no arms and no head, and there's no ship. But she's just flown in, all right? So pass it around so you can look. She's just flown in, and you can still, it's like when you stop, you're coming in, and it's like she's in that stopping motion, but the wind is still rushing, so the clothing is sticking to her and floating out behind. It's amazing, amazing sculpture. So it was found on the island of Samothrace. So they call it the Winged Victory of Samothrace. It is later. It is not Pericles' time. This is more after Alexander the Great. This is a Hellenistic, but a lot of people think it's maybe the most gorgeous statue made in ancient Greece. It is not a copy. This is the Greek original. And I think it's beautiful.
If there were any copies of this made?
I don't know. That is a good question. I don't know the answer. Can you imagine? It doesn't look like stone, does it? It looks moving. It looks soft.
Like you can almost see the
Yes, yes. Alrighty. Winged Victory of Samothrace. Love it. Okay. Open up your reading questions. Excuse me, on page 91. So just go through the questions, go through some of the highlights. Presumably you recognized a lot of the stories or the information in these lives now because you've met all these guys. But Plutarch goes outside of the story, that we hear in Thucydides. And let's start with Pericles. But I want to read the very beginning of Plutarch's chapter on Pericles. Because Plutarch explains to us why he bothered to write these biographies. He wrote a lot of them. It's 2 volumes, and I don't know that that 2-volume set even has all of them. And he also, which we haven't done because we're doing Greece and Rome in 2 different years, he would pick a famous Greek and a famous Roman that had something in common, and he would compare them then. There would be a comparison, like which one is more worthy of honor, which one is more just and moral and good. What do we learn from these lives? So he definitely felt like there was a lesson. It wasn't just informative. There was a lesson. But let me read to you what he says at the beginning. Caesar once, seeing some wealthy strangers at Rome, carrying up and down with them in their arms and bosoms young puppy dogs and monkeys, embracing and making much of them, took occasion not unnaturally to ask whether the women in their country were not used to bear children. Do they not have kids in their country? That they treat dogs and monkeys that way? By that prince-like reprimand, gravely reflecting upon persons who spend and lavish upon brute beasts that affection and kindness which nature has implanted in us to be bestowed on those of our own kind. With like reason we may blame those who misuse that love of inquiry and observation which nature has implanted in our souls by expending it on objects unworthy of the attention either of their eyes or their ears, while they disregard such as are excellent in themselves and would do them good. All right, I am already chastened by Plutarch, because I don't know about you, but my eyes and my ears spend a lot of time looking at and listening to things of very little value whatsoever. I'm going to read the next paragraph too. The mere outward sense, being passive in responding to the impression of the objects that come its way and strike upon it, perhaps cannot help entertaining and taking notice of everything that addresses it, be it what it will, useful or unuseful. But in the exercise of his mental perception, every man, if he chooses, has a natural power to turn himself upon all occasions, and to change and shift with the greatest ease to what he shall himself judge desirable, so that it becomes a man's duty to pursue and make after the best and choicest of everything, that he may not only employ his contemplation, but may be improved by it. For as that color is more suitable to the eye, whose freshness and pleasantness stimulates and strengthens the sight, so a man ought to apply his intellectual perception to such objects as, with a sense of delight, are apt to call it forth and allure to its own proper good and advantage. Plutarch writes because he thinks it does us good to think about people who are noble and who have done noble things, or perhaps learn from the things they did that were not so noble, right, and not so good. Maybe in the case of Alcibiades. So some of you have this same edition that I do. It says at the top of mine, Ralph Waldo Emerson, one of the Transcendentalists, New England. I was going to call him a crank. I shouldn't do that. They were a little out in left field. Calls this a Bible for heroes. Plutarch. Because it is this synopsis of what is good and what is bad. So I was reading Marcus Aurelius's Meditations, getting ready for Rome next year. And it struck me. He said something like, if you've lived for 10 years, you've seen it all. Because we just sort of repeat. You've seen just about everything that's going to happen or has happened. Probably. Doesn't matter if you live 10 years or 100 years. You've probably seen it. And so You know, these people lived long ago. Even for Plutarch, these people lived long ago. Plutarch is writing between the year 100 and 200 AD. These people are hundreds of years ago for him. But he still thinks it's worthy to go look at them because we learn these lessons. And so, no, I don't expect you to read these and say, I am morally invigorated and I'm going to, you know, like you've read an Aesop's fable. All right, and you're going to learn not to be proud or not to be narcissistic or whatever, you know, that fable is teaching you. It's not like that sort of teaching, but just that great people have done great things. And that's why we have saints, right? I mean, these are great people who have done great things for the Lord. And it is supposed to inspire us because they are just people, like we are people. Just really single-mindedly devoted. Does that make sense? And so, anyway, if that makes Plutarch more palatable for you, I mean, I don't think it's bad reading. It's not, especially when you know something about the people already, and it makes a little more sense. But it just struck me that Plutarch himself told us why he is writing. All right, so I asked you, for what philosopher did Pericles have great admiration, and what did he gain from that relationship? Oh, yes. It says nous. Nous actually means the mind in Greek. It's Anaxagoras of Clazomenae, whom the men of those times called by the name of nous, the mind, or intelligence. Yes, Pericles was a philosopher. He was devoted to this philosopher, and you got to remember that philosophy back then also meant what we would call natural science. Right? It was all the same. And so Pericles became a pupil, a disciple of Anaxagoras. And what did he get out of it? Plutarch says he gained something. Yes, yes. I'll quote Plutarch here. For this man, Pericles entertained an extraordinary esteem and admiration, filling himself with this lofty, and as they call it, up in the air sort of thought, derived hence, not merely, as was natural, elevation of purpose and dignity of language, raised far above the base and dishonest buffooneries of mob eloquence. But besides all this, a composure of countenance, a serenity and calmness in all his movements, which no occurrence whilst he was speaking could disturb, a sustained and even tone of voice, and various other advantages of a similar kind, which produced the greatest effect on its hearers. You know, do you ever have to talk in public or do something in public, and if there's a noise or something happens, you know how it jolts you? You know what I mean? If somebody coughs or sneezes or a door slams and it gets you off track. Imagine if you're talking to a crowd of 6,000 people. Do you know what I mean? And the noises and the distraction, or heckler or whatever, you know, and that he had this composure. And then think about what we know from this and from Thucydides. The stuff that got heaped on Pericles. It's all your fault, Pericles. We're all dying of the plague, and it's all your fault. You made us come in these walls. And it really, Plutarch says it had an effect on his hearers. Do you notice how sometimes if you're really agitated and you talk to someone who's calm, you just start to calm down? Do you know a calming person? Tom's like, no. I know no one who's calming.
I guess sometimes, like, if you're really agitating, talk to your parents about something, sometimes they're really calm.
Well, and sometimes parents get agitated too, because it's either because they're upset with you or they're upset with someone else on your behalf, depending on what you're agitated about. So that's...
I am the calm person.
You are the calm person. Good for you, Meredith. When we get agitated, we're all going to call you up. But what were we going to say, Helena?
Can't remember.
Oh.
I guess it's probably a good thing.
Making me feel better. That's my life in a nutshell. Can't remember. Until I get to the next question, let me see. Let me mention this. I thought this was an interesting section. Nor were these the only advantages which Pericles derived from Anaxagoras' acquaintance. He seems also to have become, by his instructions, superior to that superstition with which the ignorant wonder at appearances. For example, in the heavens, possess the minds of people unacquainted with their causes, eager for the supernatural, and excitable through inexperience. Because remember, Anaxagoras is also a natural scientist. He's exploring, I don't know, the tides and gravity and the planets and why does this happen? So Plutarch goes on to tell a story about a man who once came and showed him a ram's head that only had one horn growing out of it, it was a unicorn. Well, that's what some of them said. Because that would just be really inconvenient for the ram. It says, there being at that time two factions, a seer saw this, and he said, oh, that says the factions are going to come together and be one, and blah, blah, blah. It says, but Anaxagoras got an axe and he just cut the skull in half. And he showed them that the interior was malformed, and it had formed, it was an accident of nature. Because he wanted to know why. And then Plutarch says something, and I feel like this is really good for us today. And yet, in my opinion, it is no absurdity to say that they were both in the right, the natural philosopher and the diviner. One justly detecting the cause of the event by which it was produced, and the other the end for which it was designed. Think about the things. I always think about rainbows. I like rainbows. Who doesn't love rainbows, right? Pot of gold at the end. No, I've never. Rainbows are cool. They are a message from God. And the Bible says every time you see a rainbow, it's a message from God. I will not destroy it all with a flood ever again. So Peter tells us this world is kept in reserve for judgment by fire. No, not good either. I get that. But God promised, I'm never going to do that again. And as far as we know, he's not planning to ever do anything like this again until the end of time, till it's all over. And so every time you see a rainbow, it's a message from God. But you know what? We know what makes rainbows, don't we? Water droplets in the air, and the light passes through like a prism, and it separates out the colors, and it always separates them out in a certain order. Roy G. Biv, right? And you all learn this. And it doesn't matter that I know what makes the rainbow. The rainbow is still a message from God. Does that make sense? And I love that he's like, why couldn't the ram with one horn be both? Why couldn't it had a natural cause and also had a message? And I feel like we live in not just us, but those of you who did the modern world, with me last year, that parting of the ways, that science, Descartes, Francis Bacon, where all that is what we can study in a lab, versus mystical and the supernatural and miraculous. Knowing why something happens doesn't mean knowing what causes something doesn't mean you know everything about why it happens. I think maybe that's a good reminder for all of us, because we do live in a world where we know how things work. Because I don't care. I don't like. I shouldn't say this. I don't like science. Like, I like to use science. I just don't need to know how it works. My husband disassembles things. I think he's one of those sorts. Like, I got pieces of all sorts of mechanical crud all over my house. I got pieces of a TV in my family room currently, because we had a rear projection TV, and he wanted to see how it, and it's still there. He's like, "This is a cool piece." I'm like, you know what? You know how a TV works? That's all I got to know. That's what I want to know. You know how the electricity works? Flip on this light. That's how it works. And it is a little bit like magic to me.
My
You know?
mom is like that. My dad's the engineer in the family, so he likes to tell us how things work and how like this connects to this. And I was like,
Yeah.
I don't care.
Okay,
just as long as it
I
works.
do want to say, for the record, because this is being recorded, I did take chemistry and physics in high school, and I took a semester of physics in college. I do know how things, I just don't care. It's irrelevant to me. All right, sorry. Oh, you guys. Indoctrinate you on my anti-science views. Terrible. Okay. This is harder to do than I thought it was going to be, to work through the things I wanted to mention. All right, next question. Why did Pericles choose to take the side of the many? Are we all with me? The many against the aristocrats. So remember, Athens is a democracy, but there's always two sides, right? We always have sort of the mob, and we have the aristocrats, the wealthier, I hate to say it this way, the better sort. And I don't mean they're better morally or better in the eyes of God, but the better, what they would call the better sort, the more educated, the more thoughtful. And why did Pericles decide to take Marta, what we call the low class mob?
It's because they want to be seen as a tyrant, and also because of Timon was his,
Yes.
his
Rival.
yeah,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Cimon, who's we read about a little bit earlier, who was off sacking cities in the Hellespont, he was on the side of the aristocrats already. And remember also what happens to people in Athens when they get kind of too big for their britches. Remember what happens to the grain that grows taller than the rest in Herodotus, right? In the case of Athens, ostracized, right? You put yourself out there. And so, but having the people on your side, you see, because it's the people who vote to ostracize, right? So this is a safer path. But yes, I'm going to take the side of the guy opposite the guy who's my political rival.
Probably a good idea.
Okay. Oh, I got white. This is what happens. I read like, ooh, we need to talk about that. Ooh, I want to talk about that. How did Pericles defend moving the treasury from Delos to Athens? Yeah, we wouldn't want anybody to steal it. That'd be sad.
I thought he said something in his whole speech about like he thought like it wasn't their duty to like do it. It was weird. I didn't understand.
I think
just wrote my answer.
I think I know what you're talking about. Okay, there's two, because I've got highlights here, two places. Okay, it says, I'm trying to see where I want to start. In the popular assemblies, crying out how the Commonwealth of Athens had lost its reputation and was ill spoken of abroad for removing the common treasure of the Greeks from the Isle of Delos into their own custody. Pericles, on the other hand, informed the people that they were in no way obliged to give any account of those monies to their allies, so long as they maintained their defense and kept off the barbarians from attacking them. That's his first argument. We don't owe you a ledger sheet to tell you what we do with the money. As long as we keep our end of the bargain and we keep you safe, stay out of our business. We'll do anything we want to with the money. While in the meantime, they did not so much as supply one horse or man or ship, but only found money for the service. Which money, said he, is not theirs that give it, but theirs that receive it, if so be they perform the conditions upon which they receive it. I'm trying, I know he did mention it being stolen as well. Oh, yes. They took it away for fear the barbarians should seize it, and on purpose to secure it in a safe place. Again, he's giving two reasons. Maybe he believed them both. Maybe he didn't believe either one. I think he believed the first one. It's none of your business what we do with the money. We made a bargain that we would keep you safe and you would provide money. If you provide the money and we keep you safe, deal done. If we decide to use that money to build our city and build all these beautiful buildings, it's none of your business. It seems a little harsh, but hang on. I've got way too many highlighted places too. Oh, I wanted to read this. This is, I'm at the top of page 212. Is your book just exactly like mine? 212? Okay. About building, what they did with the money. All right? Actually, we're going to start back on the bottom, page 211. The last sentence on page 211. With their variety of workmanship and of occasions for service, which summon all arts and trades, and require all hands to be employed about them, they do actually put the whole city in a manner into state pay, building all these buildings, while at the same time she is both beautiful and maintained by herself. For as those who are of age and strength for war are provided for and maintained in the armaments abroad by their pay out of the public stock, we pay soldiers, so it being his desire and design that the undisciplined mechanic multitude that stayed at home should not go without their share of the public salaries, and yet should not have them given them for sitting still and doing nothing. So let's put them to work. Let's build some beautiful buildings. This reminds me of the public works, like the FDR public works during the Depression. Let's have some state-sponsored projects that we can put people to work and we'll pay them. The government will pay them. But then it's better than them just sitting still doing nothing. And we benefit. You know, back in the 30s, what did they do? They helped, lay for electricity out into the boonies and dug canals and, roads and all this stuff. They're earning a living.
They can support their family.
And they can support their family. Unfortunately, it costs the government money. And in our country, the government gets its money from us. So that's a problem. But Athens had just, piles of gold, and they also had money coming in from all their allies. So I just thought it's very similar. It's a leader sees idle multitude. We have money. We have idle people. We pay the idle people to do something that will be nice for our society and nice for our city. And like Meredith said, now they can feed their families. I'm going to skip that. Okay, in what way does Plutarch compare Pericles to a physician?
He was like a doctor who was blamed by the patients for the disease.
Oh, yes. And what did the patient do? Oh, okay. That's fine. That's fine. Yeah,
I
Marta.
did not write that down.
That's fine.
He compares Pericles to physicians because he treats the illness by prescribing harmless pleasures and stuff at times, but bitter medicine when they need it. But then the people complain, but then later Pericles show them this is to your advantage.
Yes.
This is good for you. This is people this day.
Exactly. And my question, I was driving at Thomas, was if the doctor prescribes something and you don't obey him and you suffer, how is that the doctor's fault? That is not the doctor's fault, right? But sometimes we obey him and we still complain because we don't like the cure. Plutarch says it this way. He did but like a skillful physician, who in a complicated and chronic disease, as he sees occasion, at one while allows his patient the moderate use of such things as please him, like Marta said, at another gives him keen pains and drug to work the cure. For there arising and growing up, as was natural, all manner of distempered feelings, among a people who had so vast a command and dominion. He alone, as a great master, knowing how to handle and deal fitly with each one of them, and in an especial manner, making that use of hopes and fears as his two chief rudders, with the one to check the career of their confidence at any time. If they're getting overconfident, he puts fear in them. Hold back. The other to raise them up and cheer them when under any discouragement. That's the hopes. You lift them up. Draw them back. Move them on as occasion demands. Seems to me like you'd have to be a very skillful communicator to do that. And you'd have to be really insightful to see through what the problem is. Why are the people upset? What is the answer to, which one do they need? Which cure do they need? Hopes or fears? Right, to put them in the frame of mind they need to be in. Remember, Pericles only lived for the first 2 years of the war, and then he died of the plague. It is really hard to say what the course of that war would have been if Pericles had lived, and if he had been at the helm, with his hopes and fears and reigning in the people and urging them on. It is hard to say. How does Pericles feel about foreign conquests? And does Plutarch agree with him?
Says that he was very he encourages like soldiers to stay in the colonies instead of venturing off to other places. He like stay like where you're needed, don't venture off to unnecessary things.
Mm-hmm.
Not doing stuff that's unnecessary to get in trouble, but he put the colonies into danger.
Mm-hmm.
Certain ways,
Does anybody want to add to what Marta said? Do we concur? It says Pericles curbed this passion for foreign conquest. You remember, they already have an empire. I mean, I get that they've already conquered. And unsparingly pruned and cut down their ever busy fancies for a multitude of undertakings. How would he have felt about the whole Sicily thing? Oh, no, that's not happening under Pericles' watch. And directed their power for the most part to securing and consolidating what they'd already got. And then Plutarch makes a comment. That he did well and wisely in thus restraining the exertions of the Athenians within the compass of Greece. The events themselves that happened afterward bore sufficient witness. All right. And then he gives several examples with the culmination of the Sicily debacle. Pericles wouldn't have put up with that. No, we need to strengthen what we have and not fritter away what we don't have. Let me just see if I want to hang on. You guys know how this works. You guys are the first people that I go through this, and I have to decide if I want to. No. Let me read this section. This is on page 227, and this is about the statue of Athena and Phidias, his friend, the story I told you about. Let me see where I want to start. Phidias, this is about halfway down. Phidias the molder, like the sculptor, had, as before been said, undertaken to make the statue of Minerva. Plutarch calls it Minerva instead of Athena because he's under the Roman, so he calls them the Roman names. Now, he being admitted to friendship with Pericles, and a great favorite of his, had many enemies upon this account, who envied and maligned him, who also to make trial case of his, what kind of judges the commons would prove, should there be occasion to bring Pericles himself before them. Having tampered with Menon, who had been a workman with Phidias, stationed him in the marketplace with a petition desiring public security upon his discovery and impeachment of Phidias. The people admitting the man to tell his story, and the prosecution proceeding in the assembly, there was nothing of theft or cheat proved against him. They set Phidias up to go on trial for crooked dealing. Namely, they think he pocketed some of the gold for the statue. For Phidias, from the very beginning, by the advice of Pericles, had so wrought and wrapped the gold that was used in the work about the statue that they might take it all off and make out the just weight of it. Weigh it. You think I stole some of it? Weigh it. Which Pericles at that time bade the accuser do. But the reputation of his works was what brought envy upon Phidias, especially that where he represents the fight of the Amazons upon the goddess's shield. He had introduced a likeness of himself as a bald old man holding up a great stone with both hands, and had put in a very fine representation of Pericles fighting with an Amazon. Phidias then was carried away to prison, and there died of a disease, but as some say of poison, administered by the enemies of Pericles to raise a slander or a suspicion as though he had procured it. Even when people are popular and good leaders, there are always naysayers, aren't there? It's dangerous to be a leader. It's dangerous to, and I don't mean like today, I mean, leaders do get assassinated. I mean, it can be physically dangerous, but it's just, it's hard on your reputation, you know? There's always people who want to bring you down. Things don't change.
They'll always find some dirt on
They'll always find some dirt, and they'll bring it up. And in my adulthood, there's been several political careers and presidential nominations tanked because they took pictures of him with some girl on their yacht. More than once. FYI, if you ever run for office, stay off yachts with members of the opposite sex. It's never good. Never good. But it's basically the same thing. They're setting up his friend Phidias. They're trying to bring him down. They're trying to chip away so they can get at him. Pericles, as we read in Thucydides, told the Athenians they shouldn't go out to fight the Spartans. Sit tight, they will wear themselves out, and they will run out of money, and they'll be fine. And he says this, Pericles looked upon it as dangerous to engage in battle, to the risk of the city itself, against 60,000 men-at-arms of Peloponnesians and Boeotians, saying, trees, when they are lopped and cut, grow up again in a short time, but men, being once lost, cannot easily be recovered. If they come and they cut down our crops and our trees, they will grow back. We can't grow men back. They're lost forever. This is a very wise thing. And then look what they did after he died. Look what they did. Okay, the last question I asked you about Pericles is, at the end of his life, what did he think was his most excellent achievement? Anybody? Marta, you want it? Go for it.
He said that
no Athenian ever wore mourning clothes because of me. That doesn't mean, because Plutarch is very clear that he thinks Pericles basically started the war. But he never deliberately cheated or sent an individual to death or dishonor or disgrace. And he's dying. He's dying of illness here, but that's the thing he's most proud of. let's look at any more comments on Pericles. Anybody have an editorial comment, question? We didn't even talk about his huge head.
Oh yeah.
There's a picture in your Thucydides, in your Peloponnesian War, of the famous bust. It's just his head, and he's got this helmet. It's like, and they always had this helmet because apparently he just had a really long, tall head. And he was funny looking. So he always wore this helmet to hide it. One other thing before we go on. Did you notice there were excerpts from plays, like comedies, making fun of the people in charge? Nothing ever changes. We still have comedians poking fun at politicians, you know? Like 2,500 years ago, the comedians were making fun of politicians too.
Doesn't matter which side you're on. Someone's always gonna make fun.
You know what? This is true. I've seen Republicans and Democrats, and you know what? Saturday Night Live keeps making fun of each other. Okay.
Okay, it's different when it's like somebody outside of politics making fun of them, but then when it's like people inside of politics making fun of each other, like these last political debates have been so horrible.
That does not seem appropriate to me.
Yeah, like it's like just an insult show.
If you are the court jester, you
And
go,
that's your job.
and that's your job. But if you are, the prime minister, no, you don't. Shut up. That's the court jester's job to make fun of. No, I agree.
This is not.
At least like make good insults. Like,
Yeah, at
Just
least
kinda
better
like-
insults
Yeah,
if you're
it's
going
like
to.
childish.
It's very
Talking over
childish.
each other and
Yeah.
yelling at each other.
Yeah,
Okay.
It's kind of like little kids. Little kid
Yes,
arguments.
I completely agree. We are we don't have a Pericles. The calming influence, who just speaks and people are calm, who knows when to urge the people and to rein them back. And we haven't had a Pericles for a good long time, unfortunately. Okay, Alcibiades. What is his greatest desire, according to Plutarch? Be first, baby. The most prevailing of all was his ambition and desire of superiority. Were you going to add something to that, Thomas? Superiority. And then we get these funny, I think they're funny, stories about his childhood, that he was wrestling with someone and he bit the guy. And it says, you bite like a woman. And he said, no, like a lion. Oh my gosh. And then,
Especially that's a bit.
Wait, is that when he was a kid or when he was an
no, a kid, when he was a young man. I mean, I don't know, it is when he was young. He refused to play the flute because it makes your mouth look funny. Because you look silly when you play the flute. And it says, again, nothing ever changes. He told everybody that it disfigures your face. And that if you play the harp, you can speak or sing at the same time. But, you can't sing and play the flute at the same time. You just can't. And it says,
I mean, if Jefferson could write in 2 languages, hey.
I'm sure there might be somebody out there who can do it. And so this presently became the talk of the young boys, how Alcibiades despised playing on the flute and ridiculed those who studied it, in consequence of which it ceased to be reckoned among the liberal accomplishments and became generally neglected, just because Alcibiades said it made you look goofy. That's how much influence this guy had. He was a social media influencer. Is that what you call him?
Yeah. I was just thinking.
Only without the social media. He was his own social media.
Ferris Bueller.
Oh, I know Ferris Bueller.
So, yeah,
Oh,
for free, he was like, everyone wanted to be Ferris Bueller at the time. I don't know, I think I remember.
everyone wanted to be. Just ditch school. Life goes by fast. Oh, okay. I'm sorry. There's some negative language, so I can't totally. But I'm just saying, it's a masterpiece of American filmmaking. Okay.
Can you imagine Alcibiades nowadays with social media?
Oh.
I think we
Yes.
already have a lot of Alcibiades.
We do. We have some Alcibiadeses. Yes. Yes. Again, nothing ever changes. So what's his relationship with Socrates?
He was like his
Yeah, like he liked him. It says Socrates, it says, entertained for him great affection, which is is a great evidence of the natural noble qualities and good disposition of the boy. Because Plutarch's saying Socrates didn't like just anybody. There must have been something he saw in Alcibiades. So Alcibiades would come and spend time with Socrates. And it says it was a matter of general wonder when people in the same tent, because, they served militarily together. We even hear a story how Socrates saved Alcibiades' life in battle. But Alcibiades got awarded the Medal of Honor for it, and Socrates just didn't bother to stand up and say, I did it. Because he thought it would be good for Alcibiades, to get the praise. They shared a military tent together. It says it was a matter of general wonder when people saw him joining Socrates in his meals and exercises, living with him in the same tent, whilst he was reserved and rough to all others who made their addresses to him, and acted indeed with great insolence to some of them. But it just never stuck, you might say. It's sort of like if it were a Christian, to put it in Christian terms, it's like the seed that falls on the hard ground, and the birds come and pick it up. Socrates kept planting the seeds, and it just didn't stick, because now he wants to be known. He wants to go out and party. He can't stay the course of virtue. He can't stay the course of philosophy. But for some reason, he just really admires Socrates. And so I think I told you guys that, maybe it was Wednesday, one of Plato's dialogues called the Symposium. A symposium is a drinking party. You drink a lot and get a little tipsy, and then everybody gives speeches. It's a symposium. So they went to a symposium, and Socrates is there. And so Plato's writing this, and Socrates is there, and there's other people that are well known at the time, and they're all giving speeches on what love is. That's the topic. And then Alcibiades crashes the party. He's not invited. He just comes in. He's already been drinking. And he just comes in and he gives a speech. Anyway, but he cozied up, to Socrates and sits there, and they're teasing, that he's fond of Socrates. Socrates is fond of him. And anyway, they were, I guess we'll call it friends. But Socrates would give good advice, and Alcibiades would just, like, in one ear and out the other. Unfortunately. That is here's the answer. It's complicated. That's the answer to what it's complicated. But he did seem to really, really respect Socrates. It says, I'm going to try to find the place where it says it, but I remember that it said sometimes it would even make him, Socrates would be talking to him, and he would get very quiet and thoughtful and kind of teary, like repentant at the way he lives. But then he goes away, and someone else says something else to him, and he just he's in a different mode. Yes, and then done. It's gone. The moment is gone. On what skill did his power with the people primarily rest? What? Oh, well, yeah, but I don't think that would give you skill with people, would it? What did you think it was, Marta? He was very charming, and a lisp, and apparently people thought that was cute.
Oh,
It's like a dimple in your chin or something. Isn't that cute, the way he talks? Isn't he just dreamy? But here's what Plutarch says. Sorry. That's the picture I get in my head. Oh, isn't Alcibiades just a dream? But he did not consent to let his power with the people rest on anything rather than his own gift of eloquence. He was a good talker. And when you are, often being charismatic goes along with that, right? You just got to draw, and you've got a way with words, and you can, you know, win friends and influence people. And Alcibiades had the highest capacity for inventing. That does not mean he was Edison. It means the invention part of our papers. Coming up with ideas and arguments. Generating ideas. For discerning what was the right thing to be said for any purpose, on any occasion, aiming not only at saying what was required, but saying it well, in respect, that is, of words and phrases. When these did not readily occur, he would often pause in the middle of his discourse for want of the apt word, and would be silent and stop till he could recollect himself and had considered what to say. That can be awkward. You know, if you've ever had to do public speaking, and I mean, if you're just reading it, that's one thing. But if you're just speaking from note cards or just extempore, as they say, you know, just out of your own head, to stop and collect your thoughts. My son showed me this interview with Jordan Peterson was giving a speech, and somebody asked him, it was a question about abortion. And my son said, the part I love about this video clip the most is that he just doesn't answer for 45 seconds or a minute. And that's a long time to stand there and be quiet. An audience full of people, a stadium. And he just, and you can see he's just going, he's organizing his thoughts. He doesn't want to speak off the cuff. He doesn't want to just blurt out the first thing that comes into his head. He wants to be measured and thoughtful. And it's just, you watch, it's like, oh my gosh, I don't think I could do that. Stand in front of a couple thousand people, silent. I'm thinking, let me get it together and then we'll talk. Plutarch's Alcibiades wasn't afraid to do that.
The opposite of that is also really cool, like Ben Shapiro.
Oh,
If you ever watched his debate,
yes,
he, like,
it can.
All of his facts just come out like
Yes.
It's awesome.
Yeah, there's like Patrick and I'll just be like, well, here's landed on you.
Like, where did you just say
Why did Alcibiades want to break the peace with Sparta?
It's like he was mad because it's called the
Of Nicias? Mm-hmm.
and Nicias was kind of his rival.
Yes.
And it was kind of petty.
It was petty. Alcibiades was extremely annoyed. That doesn't seem like a good reason to drag your country back into war. I'm extremely annoyed, and it says, full of envy. You know, you can be the most brilliant person and have charm and good looks and eloquence. But if you're a jerk, you're a jerk. And if you've got moral failings, they will out, you know? What did I ask you next? Let's just hit the last one. How would you sum up Alcibiades' character? I guess we pretty much covered that.
Jerk.
Well, I don't know. I said that, but I don't know if that's fair. Marta, what did you say?
It's like charismatic, driven by ambition.
Who was given the opportunities because he had station, you know, he had family connections, and he used his wealth up, right? We learned that from Thucydides and also from Plutarch that he was in need of money, which is why he thought attacking Sicily was such a good idea, that he would get power and money that way. But, you know, is he really so different than I might be if I were blessed with the goods of fortune, shall we say, and no self-control? And I hadn't been taught any self-control. Or I ignored the people who tried to teach it to me, like Socrates. You know, it's just, it's you can kind of see how that's the way it goes. We see that people like that today. Blessed by, I'm saying fortune, the goods that just fall to people, and we don't know why. Some people are wealthy, some people aren't. Some people are good looking and some people aren't. It just is. But you had no restraint. And you had maybe yes men, his buddies around him, possibly the ones that he's mocking the mysteries or defacing statues, if indeed he did that. It says he had sagacity, which is wisdom, and eloquence intermingled with exorbitant luxury and wantonness. Let me see what other flags I've got in Alcibiades. Thought this was an interesting quote. So, when he jumped ship because they're taking him back to Athens to put him on trial. To one who knew him and asked him if he durst not trust his own native country. Don't you trust the Athenians? You're not going back? He said, in everything else, yes. But in a matter that touches my life, I would not even my own mother, lest she might by mistake throw in the black ball instead of the white. In other words, when you voted to condemn, you put in a black marble, acquit, white marble. I don't even trust my mother on the jury. When afterwards he was told that the assembly had pronounced judgment of death against him, all he said was, I will make them feel that I am alive. And then he headed out to Sparta. Wow. Then he went to Sparta, and Plutarch tells us, interestingly, he acted like a Spartan in Sparta. He ate the black broth, and he worked out with them. He captivated and won over everybody by his conformity to Spartan habits, for he had this peculiar talent and artifice for gaining men's affections, that he could at once comply with and really embrace and enter into their habits and way of life. They say, when in Rome, do as the Romans do. He could do it. He could, wherever he was, he fit in. He just fit in. It says, one color indeed, they say the chameleon cannot assume. It cannot itself appear white. But Alcibiades could adapt himself to his company and equally wear the appearance of virtue or vice. When I'm with my good old boys defacing statues, I can do that. When I'm with the Spartans, I eat the black broth, and I'm very disciplined, and I get up at whatever time they tell me to get up in the morning, and I do. When I'm in Athens, I'm happy-go-lucky. Wow, an amazing character. Plutarch says, if ever man was ruined by his own glory, it was Alcibiades. For his continual success had produced such an idea of his courage and conduct that if he failed in anything he undertook, it was imputed to his neglect. So, to remind you of what happened at the end of Thucydides, well, it was my epilogue that I told you. He left the fleet. He's now for Athens again. He's now switched sides again to raise money. And when the fleet was lost because that jerk guy that he left in charge went ahead and attacked the Spartans against orders, everybody blamed Alcibiades because back in Athens, but everything Alcibiades does turns out well. So if it didn't, it must have been his fault. He must have been neglectful. It wasn't his fault. But everything he did turned out well, except Sicily did not turn out well. Notice he wasn't around to take the blame for that. You know what I mean? That wasn't going to be his fault anymore. I don't know if it's like today. People don't seem to remember what happened a year ago, like what politicians said 6 months or a year ago. People can't remember. It's like, oh, was that Alcibiades who said we should attack Sicily? I forgot. And then Plutarch ends with the story I told you, how he went down and tried to warn the Athenian fleet before its final capture. Just scared the life out of me, and I don't know why. And the Persian governor sent an assassin And that was the end of Alcibiades. A very roller coaster of a life. Okay, Nicias. In what ways, this should be pretty obvious, was Nicias' character completely the opposite of Alcibiades, and when were the two forced to work together?
Like he didn't spend money like he was more virtuous.
Yes. Anything else? Do anybody make other? They had to work together in Sicily.
And they both worked together to get rid of an enemy, right?
And they worked together to get rid of an enemy too. They were both on the chopping block potentially for ostracism, and they worked together to get rid of get all the votes funneled to the third guy. Nicias, we find out, is also very, very slow and deliberative, isn't he? He's not rash. He's not impetuous. To his own undoing. If you remember in Thucydides, we couldn't go out, escape last night, so let's just wait another day and then pack up all our stuff. Oh, that eclipse. Like, I just feel like we should wait 27 days before we do anything now and make sure everything's... No, Nicias, sometimes... I've told you this. We have two proverbs, right, that say we should do opposite things. Look before you leap, and he who hesitates is lost. They give you opposite advice. And so, but Nicias is all look before you leap, and Alcibiades is all he who hesitates is lost. Just do it. Just do it. Nicias is like, no, we should wait. We should wait and check it out. Which I guess answers the next question: how did Nicias cause great losses in Sicily? By procrastinating. I don't know if I should call it procrastinating, because that makes it sound like you just are lazy.
It was kind of like, I guess, buying time for something.
Waiting to see. Like, can you imagine, maybe you're like this, or maybe you know someone like this, but maybe you can imagine being like this, that you just feel like you have to make a decision, but you need more information. But you could continually wait for more information and never make the decision. But it's reasonable, and you're not doing it because you're lazy. You just don't know which to choose, and you keep thinking, well, if I wait till tomorrow or next week, maybe I'll be enlightened. Maybe I'll have a sudden flash of insight, or maybe circumstances will unfold. And unfortunately, that's what makes life hard, right? There's no code. It's not written in stone somewhere. You should wait this many days before making a decision, and then after that, go ahead. Like, obviously, something could always change tomorrow, but eventually you just have to decide. And Nicias was waiting, wasn't he? I thought of something. Let me see if I can find it. If I can't, I will just say it. Hang on. Let me just read on page 710. This isn't what I was looking for, but it's this. This was no longer a time. He's in Sicily already. This was no longer now a time for his excessive caution and his delays. Nor was it for him like a child to look back from the ship, often repeating and reconsidering over and over again how that his advice had not been overruled by fair arguments, thus blunting the courage of his fellow commanders and spoiling the season of action. He ought speedily to have closed with the enemy and brought the matter to an issue, and put fortune immediately to test in battle. When they came to Sicily, Thucydides tells us this too. Don't let the enemy have time to get their bearings and regroup. Get them fast. while they're surprised. Plutarch says this, he made no end of loitering, of cruising, and considering, till their hopes were grown stale. Because he just wasn't sure. Again, on the next page, when news of some of their losses had gotten back to Athens, for which everybody blamed Nicias, who with his long reflection, his deliberateness, and his caution had let slip the time for action. None ever found fault with the man when once at work, for in the brunt he showed vigor and activity enough, but was slow and wanted assurance to engage. Thucydides tells us that Nicias, Demosthenes came. Just to recap, Demosthenes got reinforcements, and he said, we need to beat them right away or we need to pull out of here. And at that point, Nicias, the guy who didn't want to go, was like, well, I don't know if we should go home. And one of the reasons Thucydides gave was because of how Athens treats its generals when they fail. That he would rather, Thucydides says, he would rather suffer there with the men than face Athens. But suddenly I was reading, and Plutarch says the same thing, and something occurred to me. Nicias didn't want to face the music at Athens. All right, he didn't want to go back and say, I failed. What are you going to do to me? Are you going to banish me? But because he did that, he doomed all those men to death. But if he had gone back, he might have suffered. But all those guys who died in that terrible quarry and the other guys who died in battle, they would have lived. So this struck me suddenly. I was reading this again. I thought, is that a good leader? I mean, I think of good leader as put the good of his men before himself. But of course, I guess if you're a military leader, you have to put the good of the larger good. Do you know what I mean? Like if you were commanding a troop of soldiers and you knew that you needed to go take that hill and you were probably all gonna die, but it was better, but it was for the greater good, you'd still have to subject your men to that and yourself. But in this case, he really had a choice. I don't know.
I think there's like to some certain extent, deliberate and being cautious with them, not just rushing through, but I think I experienced this a lot. Just like being too deliberate and not, until it's too late to actually make a decision.
Yeah.
But
And it's one thing when it's only you that are affected,
right, yeah.
and that's a hard thing, even if it's just you. But if you have lives that depend on that decision, and I don't get the impression anywhere in anything we've read that Nicias is a fearful man. Like he's not afraid he's not afraid to die. It doesn't seem like that. But there are things worse than death, right? And being humiliated in front of your countrymen and being sent away from your home for 10 years, 20 years, whatever the term is, that's brutal. But he didn't want that to happen so bad that he endangered and caused the deaths of so many people. I don't know. It's troublesome. I mean, I like him. I think Plutarch wants us to admire him. He did, and that is one thing. As they say, hindsight is 20/20. when we know what was going to happen later, it makes us easier for us to judge. Plutarch does give an epitaph, so to speak, of Nicias. It says, let's see what the sight of his person, but also the recollection of his arguments and the dissuasions he used to prevent this expedition, enhanced their sense of the undeservedness of his sufferings. Nor had they any heart to put their trust in the gods, considering that a man so religious, who had performed to the divine powers so many and so great acts of devotion, should have no more favorable treatment than the wickedest and meanest of the army. Why should we trust the gods, his men say? Look what happened to Nicias. I asked you to sum up. Was he brave?
Not wise, but he was more he's not as excessively, yeah.
Okay, no, not rash. Because bravery isn't rashness, is it? Do you get the impression that he's afraid to march them off overland? And I mean, he gets the idea that we're going to get in these boats and we're going to just burst out of the harbor, and that's the way it's going to be. And if we can't, we're going to collect our stuff and we're going to march. I mean, he doesn't seem scared. Go ahead. Go ahead, please.
He struck me as timid. So I said no to being brave.
Okay.
And I don't know, I felt like, I feel like him being unable to take that leap of faith, or like that, or have the courage to just go out there and see what was going to happen. I feel like, and maybe like I'm mixing up bravery a little bit with self-confidence, or just confidence in general, because there's this really good book called Starship Trooper, and it goes through, it's kind of in the future, it's like a 1960s sci-fi book, but anyway, the guy, the main character has just been promoted in the army, and the advice that he's given is, if the chain of command has gotten to the point where you are in charge and commanding the forces, if all your commanders have died, go down shouting orders, even if you have no idea what's going on, and the orders make no sense, because the men under your command, like one of the only things that will shake them is knowing that they have a leader who doesn't have the strength to react.
Yes.
And kind of just it doesn't really matter what the plan is, or even if it's a good plan, but just having I know what we're doing is, I think, part of what makes a good leader a leader.
Would that fall in, just a second, would that fall into the realm of wisdom then? Because you're making a judgment. It's not the same as bravery, is it? But that would be a certain wisdom, because you know that's what your men need.
Yeah, which I thought was kind of interesting, because that's what you're talking about with,
It is.
what was his name?
Nicias.
Yeah. No, the other guy, pericles. And like his being able to like push.
Oh, yes,
So,
yes,
yeah.
yes. Oh, go ahead, Marta. Can you be one and not the other? as a leader? Could you be brave but not wise? Could you be wise but not brave? I'm having trouble. Okay, I'm just thinking of military leaders, but I think
you could be brave without being wise, but I don't feel like you could be wise.
I think now that I'm saying it, I'm thinking that too. Because wisdom takes into account everything that's going on, right? And part of that is the risk that's involved. If you're not willing to overcome the risk with the bravery, then you might have a good idea, but you're not going to act in a wise manner if you can't act at all because you're not brave. But you could be brave, but I suppose bravery without the wisdom would be the rashness.
So like you could be brave and not wise, like because there could be more of a spur of the moment kind of thing. You do something brave, or like even selfish acts can be brave, but they can be done like so it's not just.
But unwise, yes. What do you say?
But like, does acting or does like being wise mean that you have to act on the wisdom you have? Because like he could have known like
but
what was
if
the,
you know,
like what the wise thing to do was.
Because
but
of
not
your
have the
wisdom,
courage
if you
to
know
act
that you
on
have
it.
to do it because like I mean part of your wisdom is knowing that I guess you would have to do certain things, and I feel like it would be wisdom if you still know that you
But
have
right,
to do
but
it.
knowing what the wise thing to do is, like, does that encompass having to actually do it too?
I feel like it does. Okay, so for the people watching, the question is, does being wise mean you have to act on your wisdom? Can you be wise but then not act?
Well, then it might not be wise to not act, so then maybe you wouldn't be wise if you didn't act, so maybe that would be a lack of wisdom in action. So I mean, wisdom isn't just thought.
Wisdom is not just thought, I feel like. Wisdom is also, just like virtue is not just thought. Virtue is lived out in action, you know? It's very interesting. Thank you. I like that. Okay, I'm sorry. Okay, now next week when I do this with my other kids, I'll do it better. And I'll save more time for that discussion. Okay, two things I wanted to say. First of all, there's a good reason to memorize poetry. There was Euripides, our friend who wrote Medea. Apparently, Euripides was all the rage in Sicily at the time, and several slaves were saved because they could quote lines from Euripides. Several got back safe to Athens.
Didn't that happen at like a concentration camp or something?
I don't know,
Okay.
but
That's
it
what
says,
Mom always tells me, because like she makes me memorize poetry, so she was
Amen.
Like,
it says to have gone, and they went back to Athens and went and made their acknowledgments to Euripides, relating how that some of them had been released from slavery by teaching what they could remember of his poems, and others, when straggling after the fight, been relieved with meat and drink for repeating some of his lyrics. So there you go. You never know when you might be abandoned in enemy territory and poem might get you free. Okay, I need to go through this too fast. Please turn your page to page 95. We are going to start reading Plato. Plato, as you may know, is one of the most famous philosophers who ever lived, philosophy being the love of wisdom. One famous philosopher later said that all philosophy is a footnote to Plato.
Wow.
Plato had a teacher named Socrates. Socrates wrote nothing down.
Oh, that's
Much like Jesus, who never wrote anything down himself, but his followers wrote things down. I'm not saying Socrates is divine. Don't freak out. I'm just saying they have a similarity, okay? That they both wanted to teach about truth, but they didn't write anything down. So Plato writes dialogues. He writes conversations in which Socrates is a speaker. And he shows Socrates going around town and asking people questions, which is what Socrates liked to do. They say, the story is that Socrates once had a friend who went to the oracle at Delphi and was told that there was no one in Athens wiser than Socrates. And Socrates had this reported to him, and he said, well, that can't possibly be true, because I don't know squat. So he started talking to people. Well, what do you think justice is? What do you think love is? What is honor? What is the highest good in life? And he didn't, in like his first person, like, I don't think that's true. I don't know if this person's what they're thinking. but they think they found the truth. And I know I haven't found the truth. And eventually he decided the reason he was the wisest, no one was wiser than he was, is because he's the only one who knew he wasn't wise. You're better off to not know and know you don't know than to not know and think you know. And he walked around and he said, all these people think they know, but I don't think they know. And so he would talk to them and he would get them, not get them, but in the course of the conversation, as he asked questions, they would contradict themselves. They would get muddled up. And you're like, well, maybe we need to look at it in a different way, right? Obviously, this ticked off people eventually. We'll talk about that more later. You are going to read two of Plato's works. One is called Euthyphro. This should be like there's the last days of Socrates or something is the book that I had you get. All right, Euthyphro is a dialogue about what is justice. What is the just? And it's very short, but it's very deep. Socrates is on his way to court because he's been called to court. He's been tried on charges of corrupting the youth of Athens and teaching against the gods. And these are the charges that are going to get him killed. The other thing you're going to read is the Apology. This is Socrates' speech in the courtroom. He goes to court, and remember, there are no lawyers. You defend yourself. And I gave you, and we don't have time because I got to let you go. Although my girls aren't here, and I don't know why. This is an excerpt from a comedy by Aristophanes called The Clouds. It is about a man, Strepsiades, and his son owes money, and he keeps buying like racehorses and sponsoring horses. He's a little bit like Alcibiades, and he says, well, we need somebody to teach us. We need an orator. We need a rhetor, someone to teach us how to get out of our debt. So we're going to go, because Socrates runs a school. We're going to go to Socrates' school and learn how to just make anything sound plausible. So the father, Strepsiades, goes and he comes to Socrates' school and asks what Socrates teaches. Yeah, just have to turn it really hard. I would like you to read this excerpt. This is a joke making fun of Socrates, this excerpt. So he goes and read this before you read the Apology, because Socrates actually mentions this in the Apology. All right? He says something about people who think I'm treading the clouds and looking into all sorts of stuff that I have no, interest in whatsoever. So read this. It's not going to be ha ha ha, funniest thing, like tears rolling down my cheeks. It's not going to be like that, okay? But the whole comedy is a joke on philosophers who teach you to make the good seem bad and the bad seem good, all right? It's just a couple of pages. It won't take you long, all right? And you have 2 weeks, so there. All right, see
So
you
we're not
next
coming
time.
here next week, but we're coming here the week after next week.